G'day guys, Al vs Bert here. Today, I'm going to be reviewing one of my favourite video game systems from my childhood, the Xbox 360. The first ever video game console ever released to the public was known as the Magnavox Odyssey, and it was released in September 1972. These remarkable machines have been entertaining people of all ages since then, with big players such as Atari, Nintendo, Sega, and then later on, Sony with their PlayStation consoles, and Microsoft with their Xbox consoles. An example of an amazing Xbox console is the Xbox 360. The 360 is the second video game console produced by Microsoft, its predecessor being the original Xbox, which was released on November 15, 2001. The first ever model of the Xbox 360, on the other hand, was released on November 22, 2005. At its peak, it sold 85.8 million units, which is not as high as the PS2's 158 million units, making the PS2 the highest sold video game system ever, but 85.8 million units is still a sizable number of units sold. It was around late October in 2009 when I was only still a toddler. The only video games I knew at the time were a few sports games I used to play on my father's PS1 and PS2, as well as many cool Adobe Flash games on various websites such as Newgrounds, Cool Maths Games, and much more websites that had these types of games that I played on my parents' old Asus laptop. I was sitting in the living room of my uncle's house when my uncle peered out of the doorway which led to the second living room, and he said, "Hey Albert, I got something very cool that I think you'll like. Close your eyes and open your hands and you'll see what it is." Toddler me, curious to know what he was going to give me, closed my eyes and reached my hands out. Suddenly, I felt a large, heavy cardboard box on my hands. I opened my eyes and I saw the packaging for the 2008 Xbox 360 Elite model, which could play games with HDMI, while the 2005 model couldn't. When I first saw the packaging, I thought the console and the packaging art looked kind of similar to the PS1 and PS2, which is honestly a dumb comparison since PlayStation is owned by Sony and Xbox is owned by Microsoft. But the PS1 and PS2 were the only video game consoles I was aware of at the time, so they were the only comparison I could make. My uncle then took the packaging with its contents inside the second living room and started unboxing the console. I curiously watched as one by one he took out the console itself, the controller, and the power cable out of the packaging. There was also an AV cable as well as headphones that came with everything else. But my uncle decided to use a HDMI cable instead for higher quality, and the headphones were not used as I was way too young for online gaming. After connecting the 360 to the TV and a nearby power source, my uncle told me to sit down and watch the TV screen as he was turning the system on. Suddenly, a green light appeared on the button that my uncle pressed, and I then started to hear the 360's fans roar as if it was alive. I watched in wonder as the original Xbox 360 startup played on the screen. What? You guys seriously think this was the original dashboard? Microsoft updated the Xbox 360 in 2010, and this was the new startup screen. This is what the original 2005 Xbox 360 startup screen looks like. Take it away. In my head, I was like, what the heck did I just experience? But before that question could be answered, the NXE version of the 360 dashboard appeared, but my uncle didn't explore it. Instead, he put in a 2008 video game called Star Wars The Force Unleashed. This awesome game, alongside LEGO Indiana Jones, the Kung Fu Panda game, LEGO Star Wars The Complete Saga, Call of Duty Modern Warfare, and Sega Mega Drive Ultimate Collection, or Sega Genesis Ultimate Collection if you live in America, were some of my first ever Xbox 360 games I ever owned. There were also a few Xbox Live Arcade games I used to play as a kid as well, but there were only the demos and not the full games. Strangely, the LEGO Indiana Jones and Kung Fu Panda games are two separate discs, but they are packaged together in one cover as it shows on the packaging of this Xbox 360 Elite. If anyone knows the reason why these two third-party games were marketed as one cover with this Xbox 360 Elite, please let me know in the comments, as I'm curious to know why these two games were packaged together. Okay, now that I've finished my little nostalgia trip with this amazing console, let's briefly touch up on the 360's technical capabilities. Like its fellow 7th generation consoles, the PS3 and the Wii, the Xbox 360 had a wireless controller which it could support 4 of. Anyways, unlike older wireless controllers like ones that Atari created which used infrared, the Xbox 360 controller uses Bluetooth, which is a far more efficient connection to the console than infrared is, as infrared you have to point in one direction, and if you turn in another direction the controller starts working, while with Bluetooth the controller can be still connected to the console and you can turn the controller in whenever direction you want. The PS3 and the Wii took this to an extreme, as they also added in motion sensing controls for some of their games, even though the Wii had the superior motion sensors. Anyways, back to the 360. The 360 also has a 12x dual layer DVD-ROM, which is cool, but unlike the PS3, it couldn't play Blu-ray discs by default. You had to buy an entire add-on for your 360 to play Blu-ray discs. Anyways, a few other technical capabilities of the 360 are custom IBM Power PC based CPU with 3.2 GHz cores, custom ATI graphics processor with 10 MB embedded RAM, 512 MB 700 MHz GDDR3 RAM, a detachable and upgradable hard drive that was in all models with the exception of the core system, and 3 USB 2.0 ports. Wow, talk about a tongue twister. Even though I do have a bit of nostalgia bias for this console, I will admit that the Xbox 360 does have a few problems. One of its biggest issues, mainly for the 2005 model, is the red ring of death, or RROD if you like shortening words. There are 4 types of red rings that appear around the power button depending on the bad thing that happens to the 360. If there is 1/4 of the ring, that indicates that there's a problem with a hardware component. If there are 2/4, that means that the console is overheating and that the fans are running at full speed. If there are 3/4, which is the most common of the red rings people got, it can be due to the same problem that causes the 1 ring, or can happen from overheating as well. Lastly, if there are 4/4 of the ring, it could just be that the AV or HDMI cable is not plugged in or not being detected properly. But be very careful, as the 4 red rings could also mean that there might be something very wrong with the 360, but that luckily is very rare, and the AV or HDMI cable not being plugged in is the more common cause of the 4 red rings. I was actually one of the unlucky individuals who received the red ring of death. Yeah, even on the Elite 360 model I still got it. All in all, the Xbox 360 is an awesome console that displayed amazing graphics for its time, and it had an innovative controller that inspired the designs and technical capabilities of all modern gaming controllers to come. I'd also like to shout out the PS3 and the Wii as well. Even though I never owned any units of those consoles, I had awesome friends who owned them, and I got to enjoy the experiences of all of those consoles as well as the 360 and the awesome library of games they all had, which is why I appreciate all of the 7th generation video game systems to this day. I hope you guys enjoyed this little retrospective of my favorite video game console, and I'll put videos in links in the description of awesome YouTubers whose videos helped me out making this video. If you want me to do more of these retrospective videos where I revisit movies, TV shows, anime, and video games I grew up with in my childhood, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and ring the bell to get notified if I do make a new retrospective video. This is Al versus Bert, signing out. Goodbye. What? You think this startup is the original? This startup was only added onto the Xbox 360 in I'm like, okay. What the? What is going? What? You think this?